Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Journal podcast. I'm Scott Mackay, your host for this evening. Tonight, we do a tribute to the late, great Walter Smith, who sadly passed away on the 26th of October 2021 at the age of 73. Sir Walter, as he was known to many fans, was Rangers manager over two spells from 1991 to 1998 and 2007 to 2011. He's known for his famous quote, do not enter unless you're ready to put yourself second, and that should be the one and only time second is good enough for you. First joining the club in 1986 as assistant to then manager Graham Souness, Walter won his first championship as Rangers manager in the season 1990-1991. He then completed the League and Cup double, bringing the Scottish Cup back to the club for the first time in 11 years. That was followed by a domestic treble in a European run, which would see Rangers within 90 minutes of a European Cup final. During his first spell, Sir Walter worked with the likes of Paul Gascoigne, Brian Laudrup, Ali McCoist and Reno Gattuso, but to name a few. At the end of the 1996-1997 season, Walter won a ninth consecutive championship away to Tannadice with a Charlie Miller cross and a Brian Laudrup header, narrowly missing out on a 10th the following year with an aging squad. Following a bad era at the club under Paul Le Guen, Sir Walter returned to the club he loved in January 2007. With the club in financial difficulty, the gaffer looked to a Scottish core in Davy Weir, Lee McCulloch, Kevin Thomson, Barry Ferguson, Alan McGregor and Chris Boyd, but to name a few. Walter led the team with assistant manager Alan McCoist to 3 league titles, 2 Scottish Cups and 3 League Cups over his second spell in charge, as well as a UEFA Cup final in 2008, narrowly missing out in the trophy, a 2-0 defeat to Zenit St. Petersburg, managed by former Rangers manager Dick Advocaat. This is a feat that no Rangers manager has repeated since in a domestic sense. Walter epitomised Rangers Football Club and everything it stood for. He was known for his humble approach to life and did his role with complete humility. Tonight, a former Rangers player, Kevin Thomson, joins us to speak about the gaffer and share his memories ahead of the Walter Smith statue unveiling on Saturday lunchtime.
Every night is the Rangers Journal night.
Evening, everybody, and welcome to Rangers Journal podcast. This is brought to you in association with Manon Inverclyde, Suicide Prevention Services. Tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by a class panel, safe to say. Chris, who I was on with last night. Chris, how you doing, mate?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. Happy to be on here to talk about the legend that is Walter Smith.
Magic. And one of our regular podders, Stevie. Stevie, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be joined by Chris yourself, but especially Kevin Thomson.
I'm missing the beard, mate. You need to grow your beard back.
I know, I look about 12-year-old, don't I? I look really weird.
Aye, you do. You look about 14.
Younger.
And Stephen, last but not least, Kev, how you doing, mate? Thanks for
coming
on.
Thanks, lads. Thanks for having me. The least I could do is obviously hopefully say some words that can do this special man some justice.
No, really, really appreciate you coming on, pal. Really appreciate you coming on. So firstly, I thought we would do a kind of review of the statue. Obviously, it's taken the club. They've certainly taken their time over it in terms of getting it right. Chris, I think they've worked really closely with Walter's family. Tell us a wee bit about your thoughts about his involvement with Rangers overall.
Aye, I mean, for my year, I'm 35, so obviously being on a call with Kevin, obviously we've shared before we come on here. I've met him in the freezing cold hall in Greenock before. We've done a Q&A, but it's a wee bit warmer in the house tonight. But aye, like that era for me, sort of 9 in a row era, I get brought up around that. Just trophy after trophy. Just relentless. It felt like, and Walter was, the man for that period of time. Was obviously gutted when he left, and still watched his career as he went down south. Obviously Everton, and Man United for a period of time, coaching the likes of your Ronaldos and stuff. Scotland and then come back up and brought a bit of pride back to Rangers with like Kevin and other players who you know, it was probably that era for me was probably my favourite era of following Rangers because I was going to the games, home and away in Europe, following the club near and far, and everything sort of pointed back towards Walter. So aye, great man. Obviously, we're going to spend a bit of time talking about him tonight, and I'm really looking forward to going up and paying my respects at the statue on Saturday, obviously before the game. So aye, legend, absolute legend. I know that word gets banded about quite a bit for our football club at different times, but it genuinely is a legendary figure that I put about.
I think, Chris, you're right in terms of the word legend does get branded about, and legend status is getting thrown about a wee bit too easily, but he's probably the greatest ever Ranger that we'll see in our lifetime, I think, to be fair. I don't see anybody matching his success, his humility, his dignity, even the way he was with media. He epitomised what being a Ranger meant to me. Stevie,
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
Stevie, I'll bring you in. In terms of his timeline, I'm relying on you a wee bit for I was only about 4 or 5 when I first started supporting Rangers. See his first spell. What was your favourite season? Is there anything that really sticks out to you? His first spell that
you stole my line about the yeah, I mean, what was the epitome of Rangers? It really was. He was the greatest manager, certainly in all our lifetimes. But to me, it was always there. Like you mentioned, you started supporting us like 4 or 5. I'd have been about the same. I think my first memory was 1987 Scotland Cup final. And obviously drew 3 to Aberdeen. Cooper's free kick, and I think it was Durrant's. And he made it 2-1 when he burst through. I'm sure Souness was suspended, so it was Walter was in the dugout that day. I just remember this guy with white hair celebrating, like the camera panning him. I was like, to my dad, who's that? He's like, that's Walter Smith, he's the assistant. And so he was always there. You know, for like the youngest age, he was Mr. Rangers. And it was just, you know, if you look at his career overall, like the whole career, he had success before he came to Rangers with Scotland under 18s. He won the Euros in '82, like the Youth Championships, Jim McLean United, and then Rangers. He was a huge part under Souness's assistant, and he just progressed, and he just took off. You know, once he got the gig himself, I think. I don't know, like favourite season, it was all fantastic. But to echo what you said, he wasn't just a brilliant manager, he was a brilliant man. Like you had a lot of respect for him. I think other fans even don't really care what they think, but you know, everybody respected him. Just fantastic as a coach, a manager, a leader, and just the whole package. And as a person as well, everybody liked him. You know,
I think my first memory of Walter Smith would have been it was a Scottish Cup final. I can't remember what year it was, but Hearts went 1-0 up. The likes of John Robertson, Neil Poynton was playing for them at the time. That Giles Rusey, I think, was this a Gordon Drury final maybe?
Might have been.
Where was it Loudrop that had a shot and it went through keeper's legs? I think that was probably my first memory of Smith. Kevin, I'll come over to you. What was your first memory of Walter? When did you first come across him?
Personally, obviously with the Scotland kind of set up, which was obviously after I'd obviously started to play, but obviously I knew exactly who he was, and obviously that era I was born in '84, so kind of like no dissimilar to yourselves, obviously. So that kind of younger memories were the white kind of hair in the dugout and always meticulously dressed, and I think it's really relevant to mention Jimmy Bell as well. Do you know what I mean? And there was always like an airy class when you seen how they were presenting themselves with the kind of grey trousers, with the navy blazer, with the baby blue shirt, and obviously the brown brogues, etc., etc. So it's funny when you think back to them being a player one day that I ended up obviously wearing that suit. But they were probably my early memories of Walter, really. And then obviously when we were involved in the 19s, 21s, when he was a national manager, we used to travel to trips, obviously, and share the same plane as the first team. And that was obviously our young players' goal, really, to obviously make sure that we ended up getting in the first team while obviously Walter was the manager. He actually gave us a wee bit of stick, me and Scott Brown, in the media for not being too committed to to obviously the 21s and the national setup, etc. I think we'd maybe pulled out a couple of times or whatever. So he actually gave a wee dig in the paper saying that we're not quite in. I think it maybe like 6 or 8 weeks later I signed for Rangers. So you can imagine that awkward conversation when you eventually get the chance to shake his hand.
I remember I was up in Braehead years. This was about 13 years ago, maybe even longer than that. And it was after his second spell had just finished. And I remember sitting in a restaurant and I was like my missus at the time, Walter Smith. And see, even just sitting looking at him, Kev, you could see his aura. He didn't. Yeah. But he was nice enough to you that you could approach him, and I got a photo and stuff with him, but I was a wee bit nervous about doing that, if you know what I mean. I didn't want to interrupt his dinner, but he was a complete and utter gentleman, wasn't
he? Yeah. He's I think what you have mentioned, it's hard to get away from that, the humbleness, the respect. Listen, there's no words that can do the man justice. And I think if there was a word that was beyond legend, it would be Walter. When you talk about kind of like, you know, that word legend kind of gets labelled about a bit too often, and maybe sometimes underappreciated, you know, just how good he was, really. Do you know what I mean? But if there was a word, if we were to make one up that was surpassed legend, then it would be Walter. I think it's he's probably the only man I met in football that would make the hairs in the back of your neck stick up when he kind of walked along the corridor, and that's the kind of presence and the aura that he had. And I think for us players that were lucky enough to get an opportunity to work under him and kind of rub shoulders on him, we'll always be in debt and gratitude for having that opportunity and kind of getting a chance to see like what a classy individual he was.
Right. That's great to hear, because he did, obviously, from our perspective, that's what it seemed like. He had that impact on you and the players. It was like he was almost bigger than life. Just, you know, like a real force of nature almost. But
I've never heard, since I've been involved in football, you always listen. I fell out with a few myself, but it's not just because I obviously love Walter and we had a good time, but I've said this story a few times, just to people in the kind of passing rather than like on a forum or whatever. But when I joined the club, Paul Le Guen era was obviously a wee bit disappointing, wasn't it? It was a tough era. There was quite a lot of foreign players, etc., etc. And Walter come in and like you mentioned earlier, Scotty, in the kind of preview, that the British spine quickly assembled. You know, myself signing, Davy Weir signing, and that summer there was an influx of, obviously, you know, Scottish players coming in really to complement that. Your Whitakers, your Naismiths, etc., etc. And Boydie was obviously before me, but then you had boys like Burkie, obviously Charlie Adams had broke through, McGregor was obviously in the stick, so there was a real core there. And then obviously I went and recruited like boys like Steve Davis, etc., who did become a legend. And then having the one that we mentioned obviously earlier, off air, and Barry Ferguson, that kind of held me that. So I think when you think of football as a whole, I'm not so sure I've ever heard any player, whether they played in the team, sat in the stand, leaving the club, ever say a disrespectful word against Walter. And that is miraculous, because us footy players are really selfish, and it's the way we're made. We've got an ego that we believe in ourselves. It's probably why we've got the thick skin. It's why we have that swagger. We stick our chest out. We think we're the man. But when you then end up having to eat humble pie a wee bit at a club, when you're maybe surplus to requirements, or you're on the bench, or you're not playing and you feel as though you should, which there was a lot of players at Rangers at that time with the turnover of players. I think we had like 35, 40 players at one stage. I never heard one player be disgruntled at Walter Smith, which is miraculous.
That's unreal, man.
Just because of the way he treated them.
Yeah.
Especially in football these days, you see football's completely changed now, and the mentality of a player is completely different. Player power wins now, doesn't it? Like,
I just think it's
a job of a manager.
A compliment to how he treated the players, how he never made anyone park in the youth team car park. He never excluded anyone for lunch. He never excluded anyone for training. Sometimes we would have to have split groups, and one group would train, but it was never like, oh, the boys that were playing in the team, or maybe obviously preparing for games. It was maybe a wee bit more detail for the boys, but like at times you used to look over at the training centre, and there was literally like 35, 40 players training. The kind of tram lines for warm-ups, you're thinking, what's going on here? It was like all of us, like another team who'd maybe been dropped off at the training centre or whatever, but there was genuinely, and without sounding disrespectful to any of the teams in that kind of era, but there was probably a starting 11 that sat in the stand every week at Ibrox that would have been capable and competitive to be up the top end of the Premier League, and they were boys that you get to Rangers, you've got a talent, really, do you know what I mean? And these were boys that wanted to play, that were striving every day to try and push themselves in the team, and they'll be disappointed. The body language might not have been 1,000,000%, but I'm not so sure you could go and find one that would ever say a bad word on how Walter Smith treated them.
Definitely. definitely, mate.
I heard Don Hutchison a couple of years ago give an interview when he was at Everton with Smith with Walter, and I think the club wanted to sell him or something, but he basically wasn't playing because they wanted rid of him. It wasn't really Walter's decision. So for a couple of months he was basically almost training himself, and he was like, but Walter, he was like, he kept it professional all the way through it. He was like, he could have just not spoken to me, but he kept speaking to me. So I want you to come back in and this and that, and then he did come back in. He played for him, he scored goals, and it was like, you know, even that situation, there was still that level of like communication. He's just consummate professional.
See, the thing as well with that, with Walter, from a fan's perspective, obviously there was moments, particularly in that second spell where you were involved, Kevin, but where he would deal with sort of discipline issues and he bother. Like, it looked for us for the outside that he absolutely had the control of the club and would deal with things. So that's commendable, the fact that you're saying that obviously that never led into anybody having any sort of personal sort of issues, because it looked like he didn't take any nonsense, and it sounds like he never took any kind of nonsense, and he had that there in the club.
No, there was certainly a fear factor, Chris, that's for sure. So I think people knew not to step out of line, but I didn't think you get that just with, you know, bawling and shouting at players, because it wasn't Walter's style. Listen, I had the hairdryer a couple of times and I seen him lose his head a couple of times, but for how difficult it is to play for Rangers and the intense pressure and the scrutiny that you're under week in, week out, day in, day out as a Rangers player, it's a natural thing that every now and again it comes to a head and there's a wee outburst or there's a disagreement in training, there's a couple of players that come together. But I have to tell you, but for the 3.5, 4 years that I was there, the changing room, your Coistes, your Durantes, your John Greggs, rest his soul, Sandy Jardins, like, I cannot tell you how lucky I was really with the people that were in charge really, and kind of mixing with people that were walking along the corridors and constantly giving you a reminder of what the club represented, constantly giving you a reminder that you were all right on Saturday, but you need to go again next Saturday, or you were all right yesterday in training, but you need to be even better today. It was a constant really, and I suppose I tried to carry that can on when I was back in the academy. I think when it gets ingrained in you and it catches you, and I think the people that I've just mentioned, it was ingrained in them and it was caught. There's no doubt about it. It's a bug. It becomes almost like a drug that you get, and it's a buzz, and it's such a difficult thing to describe when you're a Rangers player, the intensity and the pressure that you have. But trust me, when you don't have it, you miss it.
Mm.
Aye, definitely, lads, definitely. Just moving it on a wee bit. Chris and Stevie, I'll come to you with this question. Thanks, Chris, for sorting out this agenda for tonight. It's really good. Next bit is like, what did Walter Smith mean to you? Well, for me, it was even like when Kai spoke to me about starting up this podcast, it was about putting certain standards in place, and it was Walter Smith epitomised the standards of being a Ranger, and I wanted kind of similar standards for a podcast with like no swear and blah 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 blah. We don't need to get into it, but for me, he's kind of always gave me that grounding in life, if that makes any sense. He's based me on some of my principles. Chris, what about you?
Aye. For me, I kind of risked the wrath of my wife at my wedding day to give Walter Smith a shout out. That's how much he meant for me. So I done the whole bit at the wedding, you know, teed it up. Before we start, I just want to say a big thank you to the most important person in my life. Blah blah blah. I gave it the big up. Got everybody in the room to put the glasses up, and I says to Walter Smith. Now, obviously, this was a good few years ago, and the room was pretty much split in terms of who they supported. But it went down like a treat. Don't get us wrong, I did get permission from my wife before I done that. But that was 2017. And for me, that probably just tells you the same story. You know, he'd obviously left Rangers for a good period of time, and I think we've always kind of, because we've been starved of success, haven't we, if we're going to be brutally honest. We'll get Scottish Cup final on Saturday, but we've been starved of success. We've been starved of people like Kevin, the attitude, the desire, that's how the fans love people like Kevin, obviously, because of what he brought to the club and how much he brought into it. And that was probably a good bit down to Walter as well in terms of setting them standards. But I think because the legacy that he left, we've always kind of panged for that kind of return back to the club, and we've never really had it. Maybe Gerrard for a period, maybe looked like it was going to be. But for me, as I said in that wedding speech, responsible for some of the best days and nights of my life. And that's what I can say. He's gave me so many amazing memories, and I was absolutely. It's so strange because obviously when somebody does pass away and your family and stuff, you take it bad. But see, when celebrities pass or people you don't know sort of pass, it doesn't really impact me that much. But see, when Walter passed away, I was really, really upset. It really, really got me. And I think it's just because he meant so much to my footballing journey, how much football and Rangers means to me. So Walter for me sort of symbolises all of that. I wasn't, I'm not old enough to remember the sort of John Gregg era and stuff in 1972, but certainly for me, he is the reason probably that I fell in love with Rangers and continued to sort of follow it. So I think for me means the world to me. But my wife is just above him now, but I'll keep she watches this. But as I said, it's nice that this is happening. That the club are recognising Walter in this way on Saturday. Absolutely deserves it.
Aye, definitely. Stevie, I'll come to you with the same question, mate.
I'd echo exactly what you both said. I think as a man, the way he carried himself, he's a brilliant example as a person. Really, really just professional, does his job really well. But at the same time, what Chris was saying about some of the best days and nights. I mean, that's I grew up the best time to be a Rangers fan. The 90s was a kind of 8, 9, 10 and a teenager. It was an incredible time to be a Rangers fan. And he was at the centre of all of that. Again, what Chris is saying there about obviously when he passed a couple of 2.5 years ago, it really was like a kick in the guts. It was a bit like when David Cooper passed. I remember that. I was maybe 12 at the time, and that's still fresh in my memory. It was like God. It was like losing a family member. It was the same with Walter because he meant that much for a long time. He was always there. He was always part of your life. And even when he came, I remember just before it was announced he was coming back in 2007. A couple of Rangers fans at my work, it kind of broke it. It was like, wow, Walter's coming back, and it was such a lift. I'm sure he's all felt it. It was like, wow, he's going to come back. He's done so well with Scotland, and just Mr. Rangers is coming back. And you kind of contrast it with Paul Le Guen. What happened there? It was just, we're going places really quickly. Kind of echo what Kevin said about his first 3 signings: Davy Weir, Hugo Egog, and that man there, Kevin Thomson. I mean, boomf. Put that in your team. What would you give for that on Saturday? You know what I mean? You just got it right straight away. Knew exactly what to do. Had a clear vision. And that's what a real leader is. It's like he sees exactly what's needed. And Walter Smith always had that.
Aye, you've got it in one, mate. You've got it in one. Kev, we're going to kind of switch your focus over to you for 5-10 minutes, if that's all right. What was have you got any kind of favourite Walter Smith moments that you remember, and kind of what was your relationship like with him?
So I have to say, lads, the way you've just spoke about him, kind of gave me goosebumps a wee bit. It's that's how much he meant to me. Really, he was. I think I'm 40 at the end of the year, and obviously I've been a manager. I've worked in the academy. I've kind of took a different path, well, a normal path, obviously, when you retire. I've done a bit of punditry, etc., but always wanted to be obviously that manager. And I think stripping football back as a father, really, do you know what I mean? To 2 boys, an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old, is Walter taught me to be humble, to be respectful, to listen. He was ruthless, and I think everybody knows when I used to play, I was ruthless. You know what I mean? It's what I had, that edge, but the humble part and the respectful part and the class and the dignity that he carried himself was beyond any, really. And if you could get anywhere near the way he carried himself, you'd be doing yourself quite proud. So I think when you take football away, and I know he's obviously enriched with it, and that's why we're speaking about him, because he's touched so many, obviously, with being Rangers fans and such a wonderful club. But I think I can only do him justice by talking about him as an individual, as a man, really, and how he's impacted my life moving forward. Because he was a special man, and he's without waffling on a wee bit, because I get a wee bit stuck at the back of the throat when I speak about him at times. But he taught me one lesson. But I'm saying he taught me one lesson. he gave me one moment in his office that will last with me for the rest of my life. And he asked to speak to me when I was in training. He says, come and see me after training. So I went to see him, and I sat in his office, and I was a bit nervous, obviously, because I'd been doing all right, and I'd been playing, and the team was doing all right. And he said to me really quietly, and that's how he was. That's how he spoke to you, really, as a gentleman. And he was like, "How do you finding it?" I'm loving it. He was like, "How do you think you're doing?" And I was like, "I think I'm doing all right." And he just looked at me, and there was silence, like you could cut the tension with a knife. And I know we've obviously spoke about no swearing, but he gave me that word, along with the punchline with, "Son, all right at this effing football club, no effing good enough." And it's amazing how that wee bit has lasted with me. So I've always said to the players, anyone that I've come across, if you want to represent Rangers, being all right and being a 7 out of 10 is not enough. It's never enough. And it'd be great if it was different. It would be brilliant if you could play 6 out of 10, or you could give 60%, 70%, 80%. You could be really successful at clubs like Rangers. But unfortunately, it was a life lesson for me that day. And that day, I thought I was given 120%. But if I thought I could find an extra ounce, it would have been that day.
That's amazing.
Aye, definitely. Chris, are you wanting to ask Kevin in about his time playing under Walter?
I mean, I just kind of is exactly what we want at the club. It's the standards that you want. You don't want. Not that I'm want to delve into the current club matters too much, because it's not about that. But you don't want somebody with a 6 or a 7 out of 10 going on Instagram thinking that they're Messi or whatever. Like that's not what you're looking for. But seems to be what we've been getting. But in terms of obviously the sort of moments obviously leading up to it, see when you first come back, obviously you came to the club and Walter came in, Kevin, was there, because for us as fans, the Le Guin kind of era obviously gets spoken about at length in terms of just feeling a bit lost and alienated as a club. We were sort of not sure what was going on. But as Stevie said there, sort of bringing back players, key players and standards. Was Walter just really keen to sort of get back to basics and build them sort of fundamentals again in the club, to get back to basics, back to winning ways? Because a pivotal moment for me was Scotty mentioned them, and Steve mentioned them, Big Hugo's overhead kick, obviously, and winning at Celtic Park again, and winning that game, even though it felt like it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things in terms of trophies, but for us as supporters, it was a big moment. But what was the kind of feeling when you came in? Was it about getting that sort of basics right and sort of building on it?
100%. And I just done a podcast earlier, and I actually mentioned that scenario, and I think it's something that, like, without pulling the wool over or kind of supporters' eyes as such, but you have to hold on to that fact that when I joined the club, they were out the Scottish Cup, we were still to play Osasuna. The manager obviously just come in. It spent obviously money on myself. Big Hugo and Davey were free transfers. He kind of worked with what he had really until he got to the summer, and then he started to manipulate stuff even more. Players were obviously moving on, other players were coming in, and the team went from strength to strength to strength. But I think, listen, we got battered at Celtic Park that day. Big Hugo scored, but it was about winning. And I always say it was about winning, and then we flipped that. We battered them at Ibrox. I don't know if it was 2-0 or 3-0. I think Barry scored and Charlie Adams, was it 2? And I'm not saying this to drive Rangers' agenda really, but it was a momentum swing. Listen, they won the title and deservedly so, but it was a different narrative moving into the summer. That team had arrived. They had a leader at the front. They had good players. It had good players that were now capable of winning 2 Old Firms on a bounce, and they would know that. They would know that. And listen, we fell short the next year. There's no doubt about it, because I didn't care what anyone says. Like, we had the best opportunity to win a treble you'll ever get, and Manchester was another sore one for us. Like, having to deal with the 9 games and the 4 games in 9 days. It felt as though the world was against us, but that group relished in that. But the harsh reality is we fell short of the final hurdle. It's just the way it was. But I've never lived my life with making excuses. But I think there's no doubt that if you're fair, that group had to endure quite a lot. I think I've seen somebody talking. I actually just seen Ian Murray talking about Rafe Rovers playing their 50th game of the season tonight in the Championship playoff. I think Davy Weir played 69 games. I think that season. Carlos Cuellar 71, 72. It's ludicrous. And you hear Pep Guardiola now with the players, that the resources that they've got. players are overplaying, they protect the players, play on a Wednesday night and then get 4 days off. So I think I've got a fair point to say that we're probably thrown under the bus a wee bit as a group of players to try and achieve what we were trying to achieve. So, and I know I've waffled a wee bit, but my point being, hopefully it come across, is that the current group needs to believe that they can win the trophy on Saturday, build momentum, build a connection between the fans, that they feel as though the team they can be proud of. Because I think that's what Walter did when he first come back in. He galvanised the crowd, albeit he had the prestige of Walter Smith. I get that. So it's a wee added bonus for him to galvanise straight away just off his name. But there's no doubt Walter Smith, and I think you'd be the first to say that, and you would be the same. If that team was really unsuccessful under Walter, he was willing to risk his reputation that he had within the fan base, willing to risk it on the line. And I'm the
Absolutely.
same. I'm the same. I'm all or nothing me. I'm in me. And that's it. I'm really comfortable in my skin, and I think Walter was as well. That I love the reputation, and I'm really humbled that the fans like yourself still want me to come on and speak about it at my time. But I would be willing to risk that for success. And I think that's what Walter was. He was willing to risk it. Like you said, Chris, he identified what he had to get. He had to get a spine. He had to get a team that could relate to the fans. He had to strip it back to basics. I think he brought players in that he could trust, that were willing to run through brick walls for him to start with, to galvanise the fans, to have that connection. And then before you know it, the talent starts to kick in. And the harsh reality is, when you're second in this country, you fail. And Walter managed to put a team on the pitch that could come first.
Stevie, have you got in?
Kev, steal my thunder. It's just that trust thing you said brings us nicely to that point. That's what I was going to ask you. Like so many times, Walter was set up in the director's box and watch it from up there. Like so many games, you see him up there. I always wondered, is that? Well, I'm sure he trusted you. That was part of it. I think was that. Did he ever like little why he did that? Because to me, it was like you trust you guys to do your job, so you can kind of take.
Well, he almost missed my Old Firm goal, which I would have been raging about. Because he obviously was on his way into the changing room. But I think Walter really learned from the experience, and I think the more experience you come, you obviously trusted Coiste, Kenny McDowell. Obviously, we had Durante behind the scenes. You have like Davy Lavery, another one that like goes. If you asked any Rangers player, the important people in that building, Davy Lavery would be right at the front of it as well. You're a proper top guy. Players trust him massively. Brilliant with the boys, obviously the masseur. For the people that don't know, but another person that like you cut him open, he's got blue blood. Nothing's ever an issue for him when it comes to the club. Do you know what I mean? Same again, all in, risk his reputation, risk his life basically for the club. Do you know what I mean? So I think when you have people like that in your corner, fighting for you and pushing you on and egging you on, I think when Walter had that in his backroom staff, he could almost take a back step. But I also think Walter, cleverly, and I've never had the opportunity to ask him, I think cleverly sitting in the director's box and having that presence. And listen, I'm not so sure Durante enjoys sitting next to him because there's been a few clips that he's given him a wee backhander. I'm sure Durante would have preferred him to be kind of on the sidelines, but I think when Walter would have that presence to distance himself, like walking out to training late, like allowing Kenny and Coiste the reins, like giving Coiste the opportunity within the cup games. I think back to some of the things, and I'm just thinking off the tip of my tongue. Really, he was meticulous in what he done, Walter. So I think like you would need to be really, really cute to go back to all the games to see when he sat in the director's box, when the team needed him, when the team didn't need him. And I'm sure that if the team needed him, he'd be in the sidelines. If he felt that he could trust what was going on the pitch, he would be sitting in the director's box. But I think he was so meticulous in his timing for whether it was his words, or whether it was his presence, whether it was when he was on the sidelines or in the stands. So that I just think he was unbelievable, really.
That's great stuff.
Chris, you want to come back in?
Aye. I just wanted to come back in on a sort of big moment for me under Walter that you were involved in, Kev, but maybe not for the right reasons, I suppose. But was the cup final.
I didn't know what I mentioned. It was a bit emotional. I don't want to mention it.
Into these podcasts, isn't it?
I was there. Obviously, I was at the game. I try to remember I was trying to watch it. I was going to try and watch it today. I think your red card was one that we maybe should have took, if I remember. I think you took one for the team, but I might be wrong. But I remember going down to 9 men, and I remember turning to my pal, and my pal was like, "That's it. I can't believe St Mirren are going to beat us. We're from Greenock, so obviously getting beat for a team for Paisley's not a great shout. That's an extra sort of issue." But I remember turning around saying, no, I think we'll still do this. I think we'll, and obviously 83rd, 84th minute, I think, Kenny Moore pops up with a goal. Did you get a roasting for that, or was it just because we won another cup? It was good, or how did that go?
I suppose we'll never ever know really if he would have gave me and Danny Wilson at full time whether we were unsuccessful. So you never ever know, I suppose. So almost flying a kite, but he never ever once had a go at me for getting sent off. And obviously I got sent off at Tynecastle after 30 minutes from a tackle on Ian Black. Managed to win that day as well. So maybe he was quite happy for me to get sent off, because every now and again when I got sent off I ended up winning. He's probably that good that he probably thought if Tom will get sent off the day, he says we'll be all right. But I think he knew and I knew that my role in the team was to be that energy, to be that one that would try and grab it with the scruff of the neck early doors. And obviously I've said it numerous times before, he used to joke with me when, like, if he didn't get a yellow card in the first 10 minutes, he'd be sitting next to me, and it was jovial banter stroke, egging me on, giving me a wee nip when I needed a wee nip. And he was just meticulous in the way he managed people, and obviously that was something that would kind of get my chest stuck out and get my back up a wee bit, like, come on in, do you know what I mean? And I think he knew if I started like that in games, whether it was playing against St Mirren, whether it was playing in the Old Firm games, or whether it was going to Easter Road or Tynecastle, whatever, I think if I started with that intent as an individual for my role in the team, I think it galvanised my teammates and kind of brought everybody on. Like I still remember going to, I think, Cameron House or Mar Hall after the Robbie Keane game, and obviously the boys, different players at different clubs, obviously speaking about the game. I'd probably watched it during the day, and even Whitty, like a roommate, obviously good mate of mine, he was like, I was like, look at Donald, first 5 years, like, and then everybody kind of follows you, and so you have a wee laugh and a joke about it. I'm like, we're not robots, you know what I mean? It's like when you make the tackles and they're big moments and obviously games, you know what I mean? But it's amazing how I think a lot of people forget that Whitty actually passed after the second tackle on Robbie Keane. What the ball broke to, I think it got popped back to Whitty, or maybe through Bagheera. Whittaker pops it through to Davo. Davo turns, drives, and I think he then plays Boyd in, and he has a shot at goal that hits the side net, or he like maybe slices it with his left foot. But it's like all of a sudden the crowd are up. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, and to me it didn't matter if it was against Celtic or if it was against another team. That start was one for me as well to get that second win, but to kind of start knowing that, listen, we ain't getting pushed about Benabdi. We're here and we're here to win. We ain't going to be the soft touch. Because, listen, I played against Paul Le Guen's team. Barry got sent off against me. And I would never like to disrespect the lads. But it was amazing the difference in a Walter Smith team and a Paul Le Guen team. And I think a club like Rangers should never be labelled, and I hate the word, but soft, or you can get at this Rangers team, or they're there for the taking. There's no many Walter Smith teams that you would say that were there for the taking.
I totally get that. Like in his first spell, you looked at Rangers lining up in the tunnel, and in the second spell, you looked at the team. You thought, if this comes down to a fight, we're going to win that fight. And it wasn't just being a good football team. It was like, there's going to be a battle. I've got full confidence that we're going to win this battle. Like guys like yourself, Barry Ferguson, Davy Weir.
I get annoyed at
that should be Rangers.
People that dislike Rangers obviously maybe dislike yourself, think, a fight, what does that mean? Like go toe to toe, like almost like as it's old school. I think people forget that we could play.
Yeah.
You've just mentioned Barry Ferguson there, Steve Davis, hopefully myself. Listen, I'm going to put myself in their bracket, but like Pedro Mendes, I just watched the Old Firm game. By the way, that every minute at the Pedro Mendes game, just because I've got too much time on my hands. So if you ever want me back on, I'm free. But I just watched the whole game, the Pedro Mendes 4-2 game on YouTube just last week, for the first minute to the last minute. And we popped the ball about for fun at Celtic. And by the way, Celtic were a right good team. Your Nakamuras, your Laws. By the way, they weren't Celtic are in a bit of disarray. They're not a good team this year. They were a top team. Yeah. And that team went there, Mendes, Thompson, Davis, popping it about in the middle of the pitch. So it gets, and listen, I know you didn't, because you value obviously what we were, but it gets under my skin a wee bit that people think that, old school, rough them up. What does that mean? No, it happens. You think teams go to play against Man City and just want to let them pass the ball about? No, they want to get tight. They want to stop them playing. You know what I mean? So to me, I think the arts of football isn't just pass. It's running hard. It's tracking runners. It's blocking shots. It's being a unit. It's wearing your heart on your sleeve. Do you know what I mean? It's sticking your foot in. And I think that for a club like Rangers, to represent a club like Rangers, I think it brings you the right connection between the fans. If the fans see that you care and you've got the right body language, you've got the right characteristics within you when you're on that pitch. I think it's amazing how these small things can be so relatable.
I don't.
Apologies already.
No, mate, I just didn't know if I was on mute or not, and I was putting comments and that up there, sorry. We've just got a couple of questions for our kind of regular comments. Commenters. Paul's wanting to know, did Walter still do the British v the foreigners on a Friday?
No, we never, but we used to do young v old, and it was fiery. It was fiery. We used to do, I think it was a Thursday. We used to do 10 or 12, depending on the number, say 10 or 12. So it'd be like 5 young ones and 5 young ones, or 6 and 6, and then the older ones, Barry's, Big Jigs, Davies, etc. But they would have like Brahim Hindani and all that lot, if you know what I mean. So we used, and then the winning team aggregate score. But obviously, what would happen is Barry, let's say Davy, Big Jig, Roy Carroll used to go in goals for them because Griggsy was still young enough to be in our team, I'm sure. And we'd obviously, the young ones would be like myself, Nazies, obviously Whitties, etc. And we would obviously have I would like to think 2 strong teams. And it's not that Brahim and Darsheville's, etc. Weren't strong players, but they weren't quite up for the fight the way we were. So the aggregate score would always be, normally the young ones would normally win, because Barry's team would always be quite close and the games would be right fiery. So it would just be two pitches with the full-size goals kind of side by side, and you play both teams, but then the winning team would then vote for the worst player, and the worst player would obviously come out predominantly the old ones. So it was always a funny dynamic, because there was a lot of people scared to vote for Barry, and obviously he wasn't always the best player. So it was fun in games, but always done in respect. But I'm not going to lie to you, like they were fiery games, like.
Aye, I can imagine. That brings me on nicely to a question that Curry Muncher sent in. He's a regular on the podcast. He's asking when you were playing at Rangers, who were the ones on the field that pushed the team to success? See, when I'm going to put a wee twinge of Walter Smith in it, did he have his set players, like his generals on the park kind of thing that would...
I think obviously, listen, Barry, we were so lucky, and I say that word lucky because having Walter and your Coises, your Geranities and that, you know what I mean, in the changing room before games, like wee words of advice, and every game's a different challenge for a Rangers player, because anywhere you go, everybody wants to beat you. But naturally, going, no due respect to maybe play against like St Mirren or whatever is maybe not quite as difficult a game as it is maybe having to go Easter Road or Tynecastle or whatever. But listen, not always to say that the next against season, i.e. like now, St Mirren are flying high up the league. But in my era, obviously, predominantly Hearts and Hibs were difficult places to go. Pittodrie, obviously, difficult place to go for a Rangers player. So, but it goes back to Barry, really, lads. He was the best of the best, really. Listen, I always contradict myself, because Mendes was my favourite. He was my favourite kind of partner, but just a class act, a proper football player. But Barry, for me, the last kind of couple of decades, I'm not so sure there's been a better Scottish player. So he was, I think, the pressure he took off a lot of your young players. And at the time when you're in that moment, you probably didn't feel it. But when you reflect, when you get that wee bit older, I have to say, like when it comes to, we see obviously with James Tavernier now, sometimes gets criticised if the team's been poor and then maybe doesn't step up for press. Listen, we weren't under the same scrutiny as what these boys are nowadays with social media, etc., and obviously the club media is bigger and bigger and bigger. There's so much scrutiny on the players nowadays, so we were probably slightly luckier in that respect. But I think whenever there was disappointments, Barry would always be at the forefront, and whenever you needed that bit of moment or that bit of magic or that wee grit of the teeth or that wee assurance on your right hand shoulder, and you looked round and you seen Barry Ferguson, it was not a bad comfort blanket to have. So I just think that we were blessed really with the kind of Davy Weirs, the guys that just were ultra reliable, and these guys just didn't let you down.
Yeah.
They just didn't let you down, and I think I go back to the time that I was there. There was no rules, there was no fines. There was maybe an odd disciplinary action where Walter would maybe, but by the way, it never leaked into the changing room, whether it be a Bagheera maybe never turned up after an international thing, or obviously the booze gate was a big thing, wasn't it? Obviously in the era that I was there with Alan and obviously Barry. But internally within the building, Walter dealt with all of that. But we never got any petty fines. People were never late. You were on time. And I've said it when I've done kind of events and that with the fans, like I was one of the players, and a lot of the boys were, you looked around. You looked around at what the standards looked like. You looked around at what people, when people were turning up in the morning, you looked around at what people were eating. You looked around at what people were doing after training, whether they're going in the gym, whether they're doing this, whether they're doing that. It was there if you wanted it. Everything you wanted as a young Rangers player was there for you if you wanted to try and leap to their standards. It was there for you to watch and to learn. And listen, I fell miles short of some of these boys, and I'd never ever put myself in the same bracket, but I was one that was desperate to learn, desperate to be successful, and my eyes were wide open. I never got fined once at the club. You could argue I might should have off red cards or that, but I was never late. I had never any issues. I was there to represent the club in the best way possible, and me doing all the things right gave me that, or I think gave me that onus to think that it was giving me the best opportunity to be successful.
Chris,
that's what makes you a leader, I would say. Like, Walter Smith's a great leader, but in that dressing room, he's making like guys like you leaders as well, you know, and that's what Rangers should be.
Aye, absolutely. I was going to, just as you were talking there, I'm trying to kind of think of my moments, you know, the moments that I really sort of sometimes pinch myself with, and one of them absolutely was Leon away 3-0. Obviously, you played the full game, Kev. What was that? I mean, I remember I didn't get a ticket for that game, but I remember watching it and thinking, did we do this? Is this happening? When the goals were getting in, then the other goal was getting in, then the other goal, I'm like, right, we're beating Leon here too. By the way, had Karim Benzema up top, and obviously he done a number on us in the Hotham game. But for it as a sort of player for you, what was that experience like? But also, what in big moments like that, how was Walter sort of before and after moments like that?
Dreams are made of, really, Chris. That's what dreams are made of. They playing in the Champions League. You know, starting obviously with, was Leon the third game? Was it? Is that right? I'm saying, was it the second game or the third game? Second.
I think that was because we played them last, didn't we? I think when we played them first away, and then we played them last away, last at Ibrox.
Was Leon 2 wins out of 2, or was it the third game? Whatever game it was.
Leon, we done Leon obviously away, and then Leon came to Ibrox obviously, and Benzema done his magic, didn't he?
Yeah, so it must have been Stuttgart at home, and then Leon away, and then obviously Barca. So we've got 7 points down out of the first 9. And it's funny, it's the one thing that I probably struggle is to give any insight into, is like, apart from him giving me a rollicking at half time or whatever, is like a motivational kind of speech. He was like, wee things like that, like the yellow card thing, or the all right thing's not good enough, was far more telling for me as an individual than remembering like a one-off kind of team talk. Even like when he gave us our league medals for the first time, it was almost like a jag. He gave us them. It was proudest day of my career at the time. Desperate to get my league medal. You get your engraved one a few months later on for the thing we won. And he's on no uncertain terms, if you want another one of these, you better get your finger out. And I was like, oh. But then we went and won another one. Do you know what I mean? So it was, and at that time, and without quoting me on the games, we were probably having to go Easter Road, and then Old Firm probably was just around the corner. So he was always wanting a wee extra ounce out of the group. But Leon was just, I done an event with Big Jig not that long ago, and if ever you wanted somebody to put their head on a ball, it would be Big Jig, really. An absolute animal, a lad, brilliant lad, unbelievable in the air, probably one of the best headers of the ball I've ever seen. And to be honest, with the first 2 or 3 minutes, I remember saying to my mates after the game, I was like, wow, they took centre, they went pop, 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 they went down the right, in behind Sasha Papac, and then flash one across McGregor's goal, and I hadn't even got my second wind. Never mind touch the ball, and I was like, oh wow, we're in for a sore one tonight. And I think they'd won 4 or 5 French championships on the bounce, hadn't they? So they were a serious outfit. But I always say this: there's far more talented Rangers teams in the club's history than the team that I played in. But I would like to think that if it was a team that knew how to win games, that team would be up there. There was a way, and there was an act, and there was times where our noses were just above the water. The St Mirren game is testament to that. Going to Tynecastle, me getting sent off after. It's funny how I haven't been involved in the bad parts in both of them. The Tynecastle game, getting sent off after 13 minutes. The team still managing to I think Boydie scored a penalty late on, didn't he? To win 2-1. So I think when you think of a personality within a group, that team found ways of winning, and it was a great trait to have. And I think that, obviously touching on my point earlier, there was times where that team were vibrant and they were flamboyant and they played brilliant football, but there was also times when you come up against teams that were technically better than you, far bigger budgets than you, some world class players within their ranks, but we found ways of winning. And listen, I think every cloud's got a silver lining. The Benzema show probably helped us get to Manchester. So if there was a bonus ever getting beat as a Rangers player, I suppose that would be it. To then obviously go on that run, but that Champions League start to see Darshable score at Ibrox to get your first 3 points as a Champions League player, to then go over to France and win 3-0, man, and it's like you're almost in a bubble that you feel that just wouldn't burst.
It was unbelievable, even as a fan. You know, you're just like, you bounce into work the next day, you're just like, we've just done, and that Lyon team they had players littered throughout the team, you know, that were right good. And as you say, the Benzema part for that, the good bit for us is obviously the run to Manchester, which was unbelievable as well, you know, in itself. And again, it goes back to my point, Scott, about like, you know, just like when we talk about Walter Smith, like just moments, you know, just moments in your life at nights or days or whatever that he was responsible for and allowed the players to do, you know. So Lyon for me just it's always going to stand out, I think, in Rangers history as being, you know, a tremendous result. And I think even when you look at how difficult our last Champions League you know, run was and how poor it was and how hard it was to watch, actually, you know, you would have killed for a performance or a result like that. It just seems like it's a fair bit of way to get there now. But so many good moments in Europe.
On a personal note, I'd like to thank Kevin for that result in Lyon that night, because Rangers were 8-1 with the bookies, and I backed it. £20 on that was good.
Hey, Kevin, just the last question, mate. It's for Colin over at Gallant Few. He's saying there's a lot of chat about this current Rangers team need people that know the club. Do you think that's always a requirement, or do you think anyone can fit in if they're a winner?
I just think the club's unique. So I think like when it catches your heart and you've kind of been brought up in it, I think it carries that wee bit weight. Listen, whether you're a Rangers supporter or whether you get brought up supporting a different club, I think when you get brought up in Scotland and you feel the intensity of what the fans bring, and you've maybe been to Ibrox as a different player, it's such a unique and difficult thing to try and describe. But listen, I think it can be a really successful Rangers player, no grown up a Rangers fan, or coming through a Pedro Mendes, or I do think there's some sort of spine stroke, having the right people in the right places that set the right standards like that. And I go back to it, and it's hard to get away from it. And I know the people I mention are like the greats of the greats. Sandy Jardine. I was walking in signing autographs in front of Sandy Jardine. I was getting my mail as a young 21, 22-year-old, and he was like talking about the game on Saturday, talking about this, talking about that. And he was helping us like sort our club cars, and the most humble guy you've ever met. And then he quote me on like, played like over 700-800 games. You know what I mean? Like John Gregg giving you a wee kick up the backside. Oh, rubbish you were on Saturday. Cloystey Durante, Cloystey's personality picking you up on a Monday morning. Durante knocking you back down 50 pegs, telling you that you're hopeless. Like I can't. And then having Walter, like, and listen, I know you can't just go and pick up these people. I get that. I get times change. I get things move on, but I think there's a lot of weight and there's a lot of legs on having the right people. And who they are, I don't know. What I would say is, Rangers to me, how I value the club is they should have the best in practice. That's what I believe in. When I was in the academy, I used to say to Craig Mulholland all the time, and we never used to always say eye to eye. Same again, normally about standards and what I felt it looked like next door compared to what it looked like in the academy, or what I'd lived really. So we used to always sometimes, like, utmost respect for him, but we used to be at loggerheads sometimes with the way things went on in the academy. Some of the young players taking too much for granted at times used to get under my skin at times, and it was always like a kind of fighting battle as such. But I do think that, or hopefully with the right people in the building, to give these players the right advice, to set the right standards, to have that edge, to have that, and I do think you need that edge. And listen, there's no coincidence that across the city, that Callum McGregor has kind of been at the forefront of a lot of their success, and it was they were looking for that void and the one that I know the Rangers fans didn't like, and then Callum just slipped straight into his role. And listen, there's a reason why you dislike these players normally, because they're successful, like the green side didn't like Barry. There is a reason normally. You're not, people didn't really bother about you if you're not that good a player. They normally dislike the ones that are throw it back in your face, if you know what I mean. So I do think there's weight to be carried in having the right people in the building. But listen, who they are, because eras change. The right people might not be available. They might be in different jobs. They might just not fit with the culture of the club, with the people at the helm at that given time. So there's so many variables. But I do think that it's such a hard thing to get away from, the fact that Walter changed a Paul Le Guen team that was going in a totally different direction to what he believed in, and it brought so much success. It's so hard to then not believing that could be the right way.
I think if you look at the players that signed along with Kevin, obviously you've mentioned it before, like yourself, Stephen Whittaker, Naismith, Lee McCulloch, Stephen Davis, really cracking international players who know the league, who know the British game. And see if you contrast that when he had his first full kind of pre-season in 1991. He signed Stuart McCall, Andy Gorham, Davy Robertson. It's very similar, like 16 years apart, but so similar with what he was trying to do. He knew the quality, he knew what he wanted. Leaders.
And that's the thing, Stevie. We would love to have that answer, wouldn't we? To be sitting with Walter here and say that if he had probably done that 16 years ago, prior to the time that he come back, and it was unsuccessful, he probably would have changed because he was that good. Do you know what I mean? He would have changed his way. Do you know what I mean? He would have looked for a different alternative. He would have looked for a different recipe to be successful.
I think he was also.
I had scenarios at Kelty without waffling on too long, but hopefully it's a wee insight. And we had a scenario where a player where my brother-in-law was my assistant manager. I could easily put him in the 20s. We had a wee bit of loggerheads. I had utmost respect for him, but I drove home every Tuesday, Thursday night, 9 times out of 10, soaked to the bone, thinking there's no what I believed in. I could have took him up to Elgin and put him in the stand. I could have took him somewhere and missed it, but it just wasn't what I believed in. And know why? Because I never ever seen Walter Smith do that to any of the players. So it was like I was placed in that scenario, and I thought, well, it was successful for him. So some of the things you learn and all the wee nuggets that you pick off of different people that you try and embed in the way that you treat people, that was one of the things that I used to say to my players every team talk. I want us to have an edge, but I want us to be humble. I want us to be respectful. I want us to win with a bit of class, but I want us to have swagger. But to have swagger, you have to back it up with doing all the wee rubbishy bits better than everybody else. And that's a kind of testament to Walter Smith, really, the class, the humbleness. By the way, championship after championship after championship, he never goaded anyone of success. No.
He always had to control, even in defeat, he was so controlled, he never lost his cool. I remember that cup when was it Juve, 3-0, I can't remember, we at Parkhead and McCoist was going for Lennon, and Walter just put his hand out and grabbed him by the collar and hooked him back. He's like, what are you doing? We don't do that. Maybe after the final whistle, but it was so that's Walter Smith, just
amazing. Aye, definitely. Kev, just one last question before we kind of do a quick recap about Walter and we wrap up the pod. RFC 72 is asking just a wee bit about yourself. Are you planning on getting back into coaching and management? Would you take something at Rangers?
I've been a wee bit, without getting the violin out, I've been a wee bit in limbo, really. Listen, I've got my academy. My academy is really successful. We run it obviously through in Edinburgh. And it's been my wee baby really since day dot, and I've had to always juggle and kind of do the kind of 24/7, 7 days a week at times when I went full time, obviously at the training centre, when I went full time with the kind of 18s and then into the B team. Mm-hmm. Obviously part time with kind of Kelty and then trying to shuffle media. So it's probably the last year to 18 months has been the most time I've had on my hands. We've kind of manipulated the academy through COVID into what works for us and what doesn't, and obviously different relationships, different facilities, etc. But the academy runs really well now. We've kind of trial and error, and obviously year after year we continue to grow really. So I met James Risgrove in the last summer, just when he got the big job, just to say that I was available really. And the one thing I've always lived my life on is when I took the opportunity to leave to go to Kelty, I always knew when you leave that door and you drive out the gates, you might never get an opportunity to get back. So I'm comfortable with that because I've done it as a player. But if I could add any value anywhere, I'm always open to having a chat. And obviously when I met James for a bit of breakfast, we had a good chat and I never really knew him. just to tell him kind of what about me and obviously where he sees the club going, etc. So we had good breakfast, but listen, nothing's materialised out of that, and that's not James's fault because you cannot just create jobs for ex-players or somebody that speaks well or whatever. But if there was any opportunity to go back, it's certainly something that I would be open to. And if there's a job that kind of suits on the horizon or one pops up in the near future, or if it doesn't, then I've kind of come comfortable with knowing that it's such a saturated industry and there's probably no millions of opportunities. By the way, not just for myself, for loads of others that feel like they're deserving an opportunity. So it's just one of the ones. You just need to keep going. I've got 2 young boys that both play, and I'm kind of a really poorly paid taxi service at the moment. So it'd be nice to get an opportunity somewhere. But I just feel as though I'm wasted really sitting in the house, and if I could offer something, then it'd be great, whether that's at Rangers or somewhere else. But it's as I say, nothing's really materialised probably in the last maybe 6 months or so. I've had obviously big opportunities, big jobs. I've interviewed obviously for Dundee United, I interviewed for Kelly when I was at Kelty. So there was opportunities at times. Obviously, I'd been offered the race job when I left Kelty. So there was things that were there, and then obviously time passes. The next person kind of is on the tree or on the ladder, as you say, and it's I suppose I'm the same as everybody else. If the right opportunity come along, then I'd be delighted and open to it. And if it never, then I'm comfortable with kind of what I'm doing. So
magic, mate, magic. Right. So just a quick recap on Walter before we wrap up, boys. Chris, I'll come to you first. League matches over 2 spells, I think that says 280 played, 184 won, 56 drawn, 40 lost. League Cup, 28 games, won 24, lost 4. Scottish Cup, played 33 matches, won 26, drawn 3, lost 4. Europe, 36 games, 14 wins, 9 draws, 13 defeats. A total of 377 matches, 248 wins, 68 draws, and 61 defeats. In terms of honours, he won 7 league titles. I think this might be a bit old. I think this must be more than that. 3 League Cups and 3 Scottish Cups. Sum up the great man.
Aye, I mean, certainly for me, like, you know, I think the history speaks for itself there, what you've just discussed there. The legacy of probably what we've seen since, actually, I think tells you how much he actually done for the club and what we've seen since and how important it is to have somebody like Walter at the club, to allow us to have good people like Kev at the club and other people that we've mentioned. And he's solely missed from the footballing side, but I think from the sort of human side, which Kev obviously touched on first and foremost, you know, that sort of father figure at the club and, you know, a sort of legend status is a big miss. But, you know, the massive miss, I remember watching sort of parts of the sort of media bits from, you know, the funeral and some of the bits that were released. And, you know, you also forget that this guy's, you know, got grandkids and he's got a family and he's left behind, you know, everybody else. So, you know, for me, as Mr. Rangers, he'll always be number one. He'll be sorely missed, and you know, I'm really looking forward to going up on Saturday and paying my respects. And it's genuinely been an honour actually to have this conversation with you, Kev, because you know for me, like, I'm watching him from afar, but you've actually spent, you know, time with him. He's seen something in you that obviously, you know, you absolutely delivered on that at the club. So. It's been a special wee hour, mate. I've been doing this. Cheers for inviting me on, Scott. But I'm really looking forward to Saturday, and fingers crossed, a wee bit of his spirit lives on come 3 o'clock on Saturday. Jury's out, but fingers crossed it does, and we can get a result on Saturday.
Aye, definitely, mate. Definitely. Let's hope for the best. Stevie, I'm going to bring this one to you. Aldo's gave a really, really nice comment. He says, our 5 stars, Sir Walter was responsible for one of them himself. Statue for me should be the start. Have a Walter's Way and change the Copeland to the Walter stand. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would. Aye, why not? Definitely. I mean, he's Mr. Rangers. He means everything to Rangers fans, doesn't he? I mean, like, we universally, you can't get Rangers fans to agree on a lot of things. Let's be fair. We argue the colour of Doug. I'm not going to finish that, but you know what I mean? We argue a lot. But Walter Smith is universally loved. He really is. He's the greatest Rangers manager for me. Just a phenomenal guy. And I think as well, something we've not touched on, he was funny. Like, he was really funny. Like, a couple of instances, like, everybody talks about the Chick Young. know that interview. I had a radio interview with him. It was the second spell. It was BBC Scotland or something. And post-game, Chick's getting the questions and this. And then Walter just suddenly bursts out laughing. And Chick's like, I'm going to explain why Walter Smith's laughing. A seagull has just dropped a sandwich on my head. And Walter Smith got in. He's like, see that? Even the seagulls didn't like you. And it was just so funny. Honestly, we went off the road. It was so funny. It was just, I think it was just a brilliant, aside from the fact he was a brilliant football technician, manager, coach. That story Kev told about him, like driving him on. I mean, that gave me goosebumps, because that to me is like, that's Walter Smith. Just a phenomenal guy. And yeah, well deserves a statue. I think it's been enough time since he passed. It's quite well timed. So I think the club have done well with that. And yeah, hopefully, like I say, Saturday, we get a bit of that Walter Smith spirit and we can do well. And one thing, sorry, I wanted to mention before, I didn't want to miss it. The games against Leeds, like we had so many like great results, like all fun victories, this and that. But the Battle of Britain, that was like a monumental game in our history, and we beat Leeds home and away. That was like a great Leeds team. They had like Gary McAllister, Gary Speed, David Batty, even Strachan, David Rocastle. Their midfield was phenomenal. Right. And that French guy, was it Cantona? He wasn't a bad player, you know. And we took them home and away. That kind of part of Walter Smith legend.
Aye, definitely, mate. Kev, any final thoughts before we wrap up, mate?
Just echo what the boys said, really, Scotty. His words are probably, you could just keep on rolling them off, couldn't you? Because they probably don't do him justice. But I think the fact that what Stevie mentioned there, everybody's in agreement. There'll never be any debate that he was the best. And he'll live long in memory for everybody really connected with the football club. And it's a lovely gesture what they're doing, and probably the gestures that we could all do. I'll probably never do him justice because he's just that special. But it's brilliant that the club are recognising just obviously what a special man he is, and I think that's what makes the place special for me. When you think of Jimmy Bell's night and obviously Walter passing, I was at the funeral myself. I was at Jimmy's night, so hopefully like you made a wee impact on them, because they certainly made a massive impact on me. So it's and I think that's what makes these great clubs when you go back and. Rich in history, the people, you drive in the gate, people are out to say your name. You walk into Ibrox, they always go out the way to say hi Kevin or hi Tom or whatever it is. It's always first name terms, and I've been to other clubs where you sometimes need to champ in the window to get in, if you know what I mean. Whereas right. It makes it special, and I think the kind of the phenomenal man, the humble man, the gentleman, you could list them as many as you want, Scotty, but somebody that kind of touched me deep really, and as I say, if I could get anywhere near representing the club, anywhere near close to what Walter did, then we would all be doing ourselves not too bad.
Aye, definitely, mate. Yeah, definitely. Well, let's wrap up the pod. Chris, thank you for coming on, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you. No, thanks for bringing us on a special night. So, aye, thank you.
Stevie, thanks for coming on, pal.
No, mate, thank you very much. When you mentioned the Walter Smith pod, I was like, I need to be part of that. I was really quite nervous before it. I was like, I don't want to make a mess of this, because, yeah, he deserves like all the kind of the accolades and the respect. Thanks for having me.
And Kevin, thank you so much for coming on and speaking about Walter the way you have. You've put a spin on it I don't think anybody else could have, mate.
No, thanks for having me, lads. Listen, it's a special man, and there would never be a time I could ever say no to speaking about Walter, that's for sure.
Right, well, that'll let us wrap up this very emotional, adrenaline-filled pod. We'll be back tomorrow night with the Old Firm preview ahead of the Cup final on Saturday. Hopefully some match reaction stuff over the weekend, and if not, we'll definitely be back for our usual podcast on Sunday. Like, subscribe, and always remember, every night is Rangers Journal night.